A skeletal muscle cell must receive a signal from a neuron before it can contract. However, the neuron does not touch the muscle. There is a small gap or space called the synaptic cleft or synapse that separates these two cells. This prevents the two cells from being directly electrically coupled, which is a way of saying that the electrical signal traveling down the neuron never actually touches the muscle. The neuron does not electrocute the muscle to tell it when to contract. Because of that gap, a chemical messenger must be released from the neuron and then diffuse across the synapse to communicate with the muscle cell. These chemical messengers are called neurotransmitters because they are transmitting the signal from the neuron to the muscle cell. The specific neurotransmitter that controls all skeletal muscle cells in the body is called acetylcholine, abbreviated as ACH. Acetylcholine diffuses across the synapse and binds to an acetylcholine receptor on the surface of the skeletal muscle cell. The attachment of acetylcholine to the receptor opens sodium channels and allows sodium, with its positive charge, to start to leak into the muscle cell, changing the electrical current inside of the muscle cell. Here we can get an idea of how these two cells seem to be related to each other. We can see that the neuron and the skeletal muscle cell do not physically touch, but they do come very close. They are separated from each other from an area called the synaptic cleft, or the synapse. Within the end of the neuron, there are vesicles containing neurotransmitters like acetylcholine. When an electrical signal travels down the neuron, it causes calcium to diffuse into the very end of this neuron. That inrushing of calcium causes these vesicles to merge with the plasma membrane and export acetylcholine by exocytosis. It pushes acetylcholine out of the neuron into the synapse, where it diffuses across this space and binds to an acetylcholine receptor. That binding of acetylcholine to its receptor opens a sodium channel and allows sodium, with its positive electrical charge, to leak into the muscle cell. This is called muscular excitation. While at rest, a skeletal muscle cell is more negative inside than it is outside. The inside of a resting muscle cell carries an electrical charge of around negative 90 millivolts. Because the inside of the cell has a different electrical charge than the outside, this cell is called a polarized cell. There is a different electrical pull within and without the muscle cell. The binding of acetylcholine opens up some sodium channels on the surface of the skeletal muscle. That allows sodium to diffuse into the cell and carry with it the positive charge on this sodium particle. This makes the inside of the cell gain positive charges and become less negative than it was before. We call this depolarization. The cell was polarized because the inside and the outside had different electrical charges, but because the inside of the cell is now losing that distinction because it's gaining positive charges and becoming less negative, it is becoming less polarized. So the term for it is depolarization.